Welcome everybody to Taking the First Steps. This is Module 5, Be Seen, Be Heard. Today's conversations will be on community engagement. Just a reminder of how we got here. So our team is a group of racialized progressives with various political campaign experiences coming together to bridge gaps of knowledge so that more Canadians feel more comfortable in seeking a political nomination. Our guiding principle is that no person should be limited from accessing this material regardless of race, income, location, or partisan ideology. Today's Module 5 out of an 8-module series.
And our guest speaker today is Greg Fergus, Member of Parliament for Hull-Aylmer, and we're so incredibly fortunate to have him joining us. He was elected in the 2015 federal election. He serves as the Parliamentary Secretary to the President of the Treasury Board and the Minister of Digital Government. He served as, perhaps you can enlighten us on that as well, as the Parliamentary Chair of the Parliamentary Black Caucus, and he has a wealth of experience in private, public, nonprofit, and academic sectors. He was a former national director of the Liberal Party of Canada and has served as an advocate for social housing and seniors in his community. An incredibly insightful person to have on our program, and we're incredibly excited to hear from him as we go on.
You're too kind. Thank you for having me.
So today we'll be breaking down the topics into, the first is how to build presence in your community, and then we'll cover engaging with religious, ethnic, and cultural stakeholders. So the question you may be asking yourself is, why do you need to engage different cultural community stakeholders? The reality is that the riding or the ward or area that you want to represent has a variety of demographics within that community. And at the end of the day, as a member of parliament, member of provincial parliament, or as a city councillor, you're still representing the interests of wider society, a city or a country or a province with different lived experiences. And there's an importance in maintaining these relationships after the fact of just the initial contact. Whether or not you're elected to the position, it's maintaining that community awareness and understanding from both sides. And it's important to, as you progress in these stakeholder engagements, to compile information on who exactly you've engaged with, lessons learned from those interactions that may help future engagements, as well as just key information and staying in touch with these stakeholders, such as follow-up dates, methods of reaching out, etc. Do you have anything you want to add to that, Greg?
Well, I think you really, Nathaniel, you guys have hit the nail on the head. I think it's really important. You don't want to use people. You don't want to use them as just instruments. I hope you're genuinely, if you're thinking of running for public office, I hope you're genuinely interested in helping out your community. And to do that, I think you've hit all the right points, and especially the one about maintaining relationships after engagement. You have to understand that for most people who, politics is just something that they see on newspaper headlines or perhaps on their mobile device. It's something that they rarely have a direct interaction with. And so it's important that you understand that you are really the political system writ large for them. You might be their first real interaction in flesh and blood with politics. So you have a responsibility to making sure that when you engage with them, that their experience is valued, their experience, your dialogue with them is genuine and authentic and meaningful. So don't just use people for as a stepping stone towards your career, but in politics, but really see them as a force of people who can really uh, uh, explain and make you understand the world better than you normally would, see your community better than you normally would, and to see it from their perspective. It give you a richer view, and that means engaging with them meaningfully over time.
Thank you for that. So just expanding on that, they're beyond just the traditional groups that you think of when running for office of riding associations and past politicians. There's so many other stakeholders at play. You have your everyday voters who may or may not be members of the party that you're running for. You're really always trying to increase the amount of people that you're connecting with, regardless of if they hold the same political ideology as you. There's grassroots advocacy teams. Those can be people that may be just engaging for the first time in a political race, or just want to address a certain issue in the community. There's cultural organizations, religious organizations, and even current politicians that have that wealth of knowledge that you can tap into. Do you have anything to add, Greg?
Yeah, I think again, you've hit the nail on the head. Is that you have to think more beyond the regular, the regulars of folks who normally show up in the current crop of politicians or past politicians. You have to understand that only about 1% of the political, in general in Canada, would people be a member of a political party or very like, or members of a political party. I'll leave it at that. There's 99% who are not. And those are the people who you have to reach out to. Those are people you have to engage with. And that takes you much further afield. And again, it gives you a richer experience. So just, when you're getting involved in politics, don't just limit yourself to the current crop of folks who are there or who are members of a party. You have to go wider. You have to go deeper to try to reach out to many, many more people. That's truly you'll never it's a key to success, and you'll never go wrong, because again you're engaging with that community and you're engaging wider, and that will always be something that will continue to make your life even better than it is.
Excellent. And really just building off of what Greg was saying there, you have to consider, a holistic view of where you're planning to run and the community at large. And one way you can look at that is really through demographics, looking at who you'll be representing and what are their views. So these are not kind of things that you can figure out at 50,000 feet. This is something that you have to be plugged into the ground. Some things to consider are age demographics. So you ought to consider how old your voter base is. Is there a high seniors population? Is there a large number of new families or older families, or is it just single occupant family homes or apartments with just one or two people in it? So we really need to understand who is living there and how old they are and how long they've been there. There's also like tying into some of the more community aspects. There's ethnic demographics to consider. Consider if the community has a certain issue they're advocating for and how to engage in these dialogues. For example, pathway to citizenship or sponsorship reform, Sunday afternoons at a religious institution, Saturday picnics. These are all the different types of things that you might see in your neighborhood, depending on the ethnic or cultural makeup. And these are things that you ought to consider in your outreach strategy. A lot of them are actually, traditional places you'd expect to go get support. So, churches or mosques or synagogues or gurdwaras. These are all places where they're incredibly important community centers, but they're also places where a lot of political advocacy gets started and is engaged. When we talk about religious organizations, we have to really consider how diverse your population is, how engaging it is with the various sects and denominations. So don't really just do a broad stroke. All the Muslims and all the Hindus are the same. It's not necessarily the case. There's going to be some variation in what their needs or interests are. So it really is getting on the ground, getting in touch with them. And really, another important element is the grassroots advocacy organizations. And I know, Greg, you've been incredibly plugged into those. So you can talk about this in a sec, but consider who is speaking out about important community issues and policy issues in the community. Is it the labor unions? Is it the cultural or race relation organizations? Is it the communities for specific policy initiatives, such as basic income or better transit planning? Or even in Toronto, we're recently seeing a lot of community organizations in downtown East addressing the homeless crisis, right? So these are all places where community members are getting galvanized and getting organized, and it could be a launch pad. And you don't want to make it seem like you're just using them, but you really need to connect with them to see what their priorities are, to see how you can incorporate their interests with your campaign and how you can represent them.
Absolutely. And I think this section on demographics is very important for you to understand where your community has come from. And also if you, especially if you have demographic figures that are given to you over time, you'd be able to see where your community is heading. And I think that's really important for you to be able to be abreast of that in your own community. I'll take my own community, for example. Hull-Aylmer was largely a white Christian, traditionally a white Christian uh, riding. Um, Over time, I've noticed, because I've been involved with my community, I've been part of neighborhood associations. I just like to volunteer, and I was noticing that more and more diversity was reflecting itself. And before anyone else had seen it, I recognized that we were rapidly becoming the destination of choice because of its openness, because of its welcoming, because of the opportunity for good jobs, inexpensive housing, and you could live in French. It became, and it is the second highest pole of attraction for immigrants in all of Quebec after Montreal. And even better than Montreal, 2/3 of new Canadians, when they arrive in Montreal, will stay, 1/3 will leave, as opposed to 98% of new Canadians who arrive in my region stay. So, um, just knowing that intuitively and then having it confirmed by numbers allowed me to identify what were going to be the issues that people were soon about to confront and to deal with. How to get started here, how to adjust, how to integrate yourself, how to be part of the organization, how communities can help themselves. So that was demographics is really, really key. Again, don't use it from an instrumentalization perspective. You're not just using people, but do it to better understand your community and its peoples.
And that's a good lead into considering the fact of not using events or community engagement as necessarily opportunistic, but as conversation pieces. And when you're looking for those events to engage in, the new trend is a lot of things are on social media, but there's also community newspapers. So, for example, there's Caribbean newspapers in Toronto where you'll see different events and perspectives on issues that are going on. But you can also get insight from Twitter about what's going on in the community, different events that are coming up, and even local news channels, whether it's CP24, Omni News, or anything like that. When you're looking to engage in these events and to attend, look for the point of contact and consider any necessary protocols for engaging that person. It might be cultural specific, it might be religious specific, and that's really you need to dive into the details on that one to make sure that you're properly engaging people respectfully. Ask about an available time to speak and explain what you're doing, why you want to talk to that group, and understand where they're coming from and how their traditional perspectives on issues and what's going on in the world right now that's affecting them, so that you can shape the conversation and come informed to the conversation. Ask your personal networks if they know of events that aren't advertised to the public, because quite often there's just social gatherings on a Friday evening or Sunday morning that people are just having coffee or brunch or just community conversations. Ask locals about their previous experience of events and the reception of politicians at those events versus other types of events. So this is important. If there's community events that go on, for example, a powwow that traditionally the politicians have just shown up just to show face, that may not be well received, right? Because it seems like it's a one-way conversation, and it might not be the best opportunity to that's your first show in the community when you're considering running for office. Lastly, arrive early and ask permission before inviting others along to attend. Do you have anything you want to add to that, Greg?
Well, Nathaniel, I think again, you and Abdi have just been getting the right tone on here. Um, People can sniff out inauthenticity like that. Okay, I mean they could figure this out pretty quickly. And if you're just showing up to take a picture and then to run off to put it on social media, not engaging with people, you've actually, it's not that you're neutral, you've actually done harm to your candidacy and the way people see you. When you go to an event, take the time, especially an event that you're not familiar with, take the time to engage, to really understand where it's going about. Before I ran, I didn't know the Muslim community well at all. It was a very, very small community. It was just beginning to grow. And a friend of mine who's Muslim invited me to the mosque to come out on the Fridays. Now, I'm part of the Catholic faith community. What really I what I immediately understood is A, the faith perspective. So that was a great way to make that type of translation. But B, it was really remarkable for me because to me, the services were just like the services in my church. It was, the same approach and moral teachings. And then the concerns of the community, I immediately understood it and compared it to my own faith community. So that allowed me to make that translation a lot easier. But if I hadn't developed the familiarity of hearing the services on a regular basis, of going to mosque, where I was warmly welcomed, I will add, then you're missing out. You're missing out on an important part of your community. So when you go, engage, lean in, be deep about it. Don't just be something where you go in, take a picture, and you scoot off. That that will do harm to you.
And just to build on what Greg is talking about of when you're engaging, consider those protocols to be respectful in the conversation and to respect the area that you're in and the people that you're engaging with. So use appropriate forms of address, and this again may require you to go a bit into the details and research of what's appropriate, and asking a friend, asking community leaders of what they want to what they prefer to be called by, whether it's their name, a title, a pronoun, etc. So some community titles might be doctor, brother, sister, or Mr., Miss, Mix. And it's better to err on the side of caution by asking in advance of what people prefer to be called by and the titles of other individuals and how to approach them in those conversations. Some religious traditions have greetings used by members, and these may be appreciated but not required by those from the outside.
Exactly. And especially when you're going to a place where you don't know, you're going to have to do some research. You're going to have to read up about it a little bit, or if you have a friend who's part of that community, to take the time to ask the questions before you actually put foot there the first time. It's very helpful for you to understand what's appropriate and what isn't appropriate to do. Um, and don't be embarrassed to ask questions. You're not going to know unless you either do the research or you ask. And I was just reading, I forget who said it, but somebody said, it's better to be considered a fool for a minute by asking a question than to be considered a fool for a lifetime by not asking any questions. So, use this opportunity to get to know, um, to ask questions, to understand what's appropriate, what isn't appropriate. Uh, if you're not part of the faith community, don't go to a synagogue and start partaking in the prayers, or if you go to a mosque or if you go to a church, unless you're part of that community. So and you have to understand what the appropriate role is. But all I do know is that most communities they're so happy to have someone who is not part of it to get to know them better. It validates their traditions, and also it's an opportunity for them to show off the wealth of their traditions. And people are usually very happy to accommodate you and to welcome you to join them.
And just continuing on that, some things that are coming a bit more modern within society, but to others it's not anything new. Um, Consider acknowledging the land that you're on in the history. So, for example, if you're on Anishinaabe territory, it's
As we
not just
are
about
here.
yeah, as we are. It's not just about saying we're acknowledging the territory. Consider the laws, the obligations, and the teachings of that nation and being on that territory and what it means to actually live on the lands that are from that nation. If you're engaging an indigenous elder or knowledge keepers or persons, consider that individual nation's protocols. So, for example, if that nation follows a tradition of offering of tobacco for teachings or engagement, When giving tobacco, place it in front of the elder and state your request. Placing it in front of them gives them the opportunity to accept or pass on your request. And again, this is important to think about the protocols, and it shines a light on other demographics as well and other communities of individual protocols to respect. Be cognizant of socioeconomic levels, comfort levels with receiving, asking for charitable donations or participation, experiencing with filling paperwork for party membership or support will vary. Pay attention to your own nonverbal communication and those of others, including eye contact and body language. While direct eye contact can be valued in Canada, in some cultures it's common to look down or avoid direct eye contact. As well as what is verbalized or not verbalized varies by culture and affects which feelings are okay and which are expressed. Do you have anything you want to
That's
add, Greg?
exactly. No, I think you really hit your nail on the head with, again, with regards to recognizing indigenous traditions and the land in which we stand. I think that's always very important to understand the specific traditions which are to the particular nation. Um, if there are some faith communities where it wouldn't be appropriate for a non-family member to shake hands with a female member, for example. But there are others where that's not a problem. Even within a faith tradition, there are some who are more orthodox and some who are less orthodox. So just being aware to try to take the different social cues to be respectful of that. I'm glad you pointed out about eye contact. There are a number of African diaspora communities where it's you think that the person just isn't connecting with you or is being impolite, but no, it's a Canadian tradition to look straight in the eye, but that's not a tradition that's worldwide. So just be aware of those kind of signals and understand. And by understanding that, I think that could lower your no, I put it in the positive. It will increase your confidence as to what the real interaction and the engagement that you're getting with the people who you're meeting with.
And just expanding on that, of those dynamics and the protocols within an individual community. Again, these are just protocols to consider in terms of being respectful. Consider wearing modest clothing when entering houses of worship. Generally, this means clothing that covers the shoulders, knees, and elbows. Doesn't have to be anything crazy, but it's just that the modesty aspect that some faiths observe within their houses of worship. Shoes should be removed when entering homes and houses of worship of Buddhists, Hindus, Muslims, and Sikhs. Men should offer to cover their head when entering homes and houses of worship of Jews and Sikhs. Again, it's that conversation piece in advance of what to expect. Remove head coverings when entering most Christian houses of worship. And some items of jewelry, such as bracelets, necklaces, or beads worn by both males and females, may have religious significance and should not be touched or removed without the wearer's permission. Do you have anything you want to add there, Greg?
I think that's just good. That's a good politesse, as we would say, to making sure that you understand what's important and how that works out. That applies not only for houses of worship, but that also applies to just people's private homes. To understanding what the tradition is. I always tell my volunteers when it's a small thing, but it's an important thing, which I'll share with the people who are watching this. When you go door to door, don't walk across lawns. Some people take great care of their lawns, or some people want to take great care of their lawns and they don't. But follow the pathway. Don't cross. Although it takes longer for you to do it, it's one way to be very, very respectful of people's property.
No, absolutely. And another, not only the protocol, but there's just the general practical sense of where and when to engage. So you ought to choose meeting locations thoughtfully, consider neutral spaces and those that are accessible. Consider rotating meeting spaces to ensure fairness and avoiding any appearance of bias toward one group, including any cultural factor, especially religion, neighborhood, or socioeconomic. And different cultures view time intervals and time duration differently. So this is more of really all tying together the different aspects of how do you approach connecting with communities and going about having those meetings. Again, there's no one size fits all. It requires you to do the research, requires you to connect with the community, and it requires you to be thoughtful and really diligent in your interactions with community members.
I
Greg,
think
if
that's
there's
I think
anything
Abdi,
there, yeah,
I think Abdi, you're absolutely right, and just making sure that you have that kind of environment. You mix up the days in which you're having events. You don't want to have events always on Sundays because then you won't reach Christian groups. You don't want certain Christian groups.
exactly.
Some of them, the Sabbath is Friday night to Saturday. The Jewish
Hmm.
community is from Friday night to Saturday. The Muslim community, you have to be very respectful. Don't organize everything on Fridays. There are just
Hmm.
ways that you have to mix and match to making sure that you can accommodate everyone.
No, exactly. I mean, just a quick anecdote from when I was helping LPC a few years ago. The height of the 2015 campaign, it was around Ramadan, which is an incredibly
Mhm.
important month of religious celebrations for Muslims, which requires abstaining from eating and drinking. So you definitely don't want to have an event where you're bringing food to an event where you're trying to reach out to the Muslim community. So it's those kind of things that you need to be really thoughtful of, so as not
Yeah.
to not only not even about really offending anybody, but it's just showing that you're being thoughtful and considerate.
A
Um,
small thing is to making sure the food that you're serving is halal or kosher. They're both the
right.
same, very, very close. You'll never notice the
Hmm.
difference. Just making sure you do that. It's a small step to making
Exactly.
sure that you can include people. Give people a non-meat
Exactly.
option,
Yeah.
so that you can take care of people who are either through faith or through conviction, don't eat meat.
Hmm.
So these are the important things to
Absolutely.
do to try to be as welcoming as possible.
Absolutely. And really, remember, many communities and religious leaders are bivocational. So avoid meeting or scheduling during the daytime when possible and rotate meeting schedules. Respect the days of Sabbath and religious holy days. Most religious groups are open to interreligious or interfaith, multi faith dialogue. However, it's also important to consider who they would partner with, as some groups are not necessarily. There is a bit of a cultural nuance there that needs to be considered. So really, again, as you were saying, Greg, there's no one size fits all. It requires a serious commitment to learning about the community and the people you're meeting with. And again, as you said earlier in the presentation, people can really suss out inauthenticity, and this kind of ties into showing that you're authentic about your engagement with them.
That's right. And really, not much to add, Abdi. If you make a mistake, also fess up.
Mhm. Yeah.
Admit that you weren't aware, and ask how you can make sure that this doesn't happen in the future. People understand that if you don't come from that community, you're going to make mistakes. But do yourself a favor and do as much homework as you can beforehand, so that you really don't find yourself
Mhm.
in an uncomfortable situation.
Mhm. No, absolutely. You just have to be putting it willing to put in the work. And we'll go ahead and jump right into our discussions, and I'll just kick it off. Uh, Before politics, Greg, what did your career and upbringing look like?
Well, immediately before politics, I was in the university field, but I think that would be a little bit misleading. I was there for about 3.5 years. Beforehand, I was very much involved in politics. Most of my adult life has been working in and around federal politics. Either as a volunteer or as an actual paid position. So that's what it's been about. My upbringing was wonderful, to two immigrant parents who really worked very hard to making sure that their kids had as much as they can offer. And but they didn't have connections and they didn't have money, but they were able to work hard to provide my sister and brother, myself, a good education, and I'm always grateful for that. And they figured that if we use our noggins, we would be able to make something of ourselves. We might have to work a little bit harder to do so, but that's the beauty and promise of Canada, is that if done right, and we use what our skills, we should be able to achieve success.
No, absolutely. And I mean, you kind of touched up on this, but what really drove you to get involved when you were, a young adult
You know,
with politics and community advocacy?
I
What was
asked
the,
I
the
asked my
spark for
dad
you?
that. I asked my dad that on the election night in 2015, figuring he had a better insight into my character than I did when I was 5 years old. Uh, he just figures I must have fallen on my head somewhere. It's just had always just been involved and been involved with trying to help people out. And as I went along in my life, those are the things that brought me joy, and those are the things where I felt I could make a difference. And I think politics is just a natural outcrop of that.
No, absolutely. And, some of us caught the political bug early, as they say, and it never quite goes away. Just looking back from your, incredibly powerful and amazing political journey and career, what are some key lessons for candidates from your own previous campaigns?
I think the best thing I could say is just to be yourself,
Mhm.
warts and all. Don't try to be someone who you're not. Uh, when in 2009, I ran for the Liberal nomination in a riding next to mine, a rural riding, a riding in which I didn't live. I lived in Hull-Aylmer for 30 plus years, but I ran in this other riding because Hull-Aylmer wasn't available. The Liberal nomination wasn't available. Well, I was a terrible candidate. I tried to be the perfect one. I always had that nice word, never put a foot wrong. Oh God, uh, what happened is I developed a wooden tongue. I wasn't saying anything interesting. I wasn't being myself. And after I lost that one, thank God, I said if I ever, politics is so much about timing. I told myself that if I had a chance to do this again, I'm just going to be me. Like I said, warts and all, with my dad jokes, and people hopefully will elect me. And if they don't elect me, then that's fine. At least I'm still myself.
Mhm.
Fair enough.
Absolutely.
And so I guess building on that, the timing piece of finding that right timing and that feeling of it from your own personal experience, what do you think is the biggest deterrent for underrepresented demographics seeking office?
Yeah, I think there's probably two things that work. First of all, um, and both are negative. Um, so there are some people who will be surprised that underrepresented groups are trying to run because no one from that group has ever represented them before. That's true. But things are impossible until they happen. So um, don't let that be a deterrent. Uh, the second deterrent is more insidious. It's the deterrent that we put on ourselves. It's the one where we say, well, no woman has ever run here before. Maybe I shouldn't do that. Or no person of color has run here before. No indigenous person has run here. Stop it. Don't, don't. If you already have the no. If you don't do anything, nothing will happen. So you have that. You might as well be brave, be courageous, try. Uh, you'll you'll be really surprised. And if you try, you might have the opportunity to get the yes. So don't be afraid. Just get out there and really try your best. Don't don't self censor yourself. It's tough enough that you have to perhaps deal with any other obstacles that others may have. Don't put that onto yourself.
And just building on what you're just talking about there, what piece of advice do you have for those that may not think that they have the political capital or experience necessary to make a difference in elected office?
Now that's a fair point. Uh, that's very much a fair point. You have to really think about why you want to do this. Let me tell you a story. When I was 18, I did a Forum for Young Canadians. It's where they gather people, and 125 youth, and they bring them to Ottawa for a week from all across the country to learn about the machinery of government. And I went there, and it was really fabulous. At the end of the week, they had something, a mock election where you could run for prime minister. Well, hey, prime minister, that sounds cool. I decided I'd run for that, and I, did a little campaign, and I won. And I was so pleased. I got the position. Then the organizer said, "Well, okay, Greg, congratulations, Prime Minister. Um, Now we want you to host a federal provincial conference because there are all these premiers who also got elected." Well, I had no idea what to do. I didn't even think about what I wanted to accomplish. It was such an unsettling feeling for me. It stayed with me for the last 43 years, or 33 years rather. So to me, you should always know at least a couple of things that you want to accomplish before you go into it. Now, you don't need to have political capital or experiences necessary, but you should know at least that if you got there, what you want to accomplish. Otherwise, you're going to be buffeted by the winds and waves of what's coming at you, as opposed to understanding where you want to get to. And that's really important. Now, your objectives may change over time, but at least you started out with some objectives, and I think that's an important thing. So, don't worry about the political capital; you'll get that. Don't worry about the experience; you can also get that. But you better be sure you know what you want to do, because it's a tough enough job.
Thank you for that, Greg, and for your insights. So that wraps up Module 5. Do you have any last kind of words of advice or anything for any viewers out there?
Yes, I'd say, and I think it's consistent with what I've been saying is, don't be afraid. Don't be afraid. Just lean in. We need politics to be as rich and as diverse as the people of Canada. We need more women. We need more Indigenous peoples. We need more people of color. Uh, we need more people of various abilities to be forward. So please come forward, try it out. You won't be disappointed. Bring what is special about you to politics. And that will be you'll be making a great contribution to our society, and we'll keep this thing going for another generation.
Well, thank you, Greg, so much for your participation and insights into this module, as well as helping future uh, racialized leaders have a sense of direction moving forward.
Super.
So
Anytime,
the next
and if anyone ever wants to contact me, feel free to do so. I'd be happy to connect with anyone who drops me a line.
For viewers out there, the next module will be social media strategy, engaging supporters online. Follow us for future module releases.